Hello. Here we go. All right. Projects I'm working on? Let's see. Yeah. These little jars. I made these little tiny jellyfish. And now I need to get them a home. So the bubbles will come off eventually. But it may take a few days because the liquid is kind of thick. But yeah. That's what I'm working on. Again, I've got 4 more of these to finish. Wonder if I should add more water to it. It's kind of viscous. They'll come up in a couple of days. All right.
I don't get any leaf stain. Here's Tide. Do I need to appreciate guacamole? No, Tide.
Why do we even buy?
Thankfully, Tide's the answer to almost all of them.
It cracks my eyebrows.
Except that one.
For all of life's laundry questions, it's got to be Tide.
This is the story of Gavin,
What?
a Harris who became such a viral sensation that he changed careers and never looked back. Another decision he didn't second guess? Getting Manulife Cover Me health and dental insurance. Prescription allergy
Right
pills?
there.
Covered. Physiotherapy after a tough day of shrubbery? Covered. With comprehensive coverage from Manulife Cover Me, you can get on with whatever life looks like. Call 1-877-COVER-ME or visit coverme.com to get a quote today.
They say that you're never too old to enjoy the great outdoors, but the fact of the matter is that you're apparently also never too old to go missing in Yosemite National Park. I'm Nathan Madison, and welcome back to the Horror Movie.
I haven't listened to this in a while, so let's give her a listen. Where is it? I haven't gone anywhere. Where is
At
it?
over 1,200 miles of territory,
Found
Yosemite is America's 16th largest
Was.
national park, and the 9th largest in the contiguous 48. For our non-American viewers, that's every state except for Alaska and Hawaii, the former being home to 4 of the 5 largest parks. Yosemite is also the 6th most visited park in the system, with over 4 million visitors in 2024 alone. So it's to be expected then that every once in a while, someone is going to disappear. The interesting part is that sometimes those disappearances don't make a ton of sense. If you've been around for a while and seen our other Missing 411 content, especially the more recent stuff, then you know how we do this and I probably don't need to explain it to you at length. If you're not, however, then I'll give you a quick rundown on how our investigations work. While we do take inspiration from David Paulides' Missing 411 series, we mainly use it as a guide to find mysterious and unsolved cases and do deep dives into them. Now, Paulides breaks his books up into what he calls clusters,
fucker.
and the Yosemite Missing
Cluster
411
fucker.
cluster is a big one at 34 disappearances.
Oh yeah.
In fact, I'd argue it's too big to really be called a singular cluster. The distance between the northernmost and southernmost cases is about 112 miles, or 180 kilometers, and the distance between the easternmost and the westernmost cases around 125 miles, or 201 kilometers. That said, there are a couple of areas where there are at least 5 disappearances within one very small region, so it's not inaccurate to say that there is a cluster of missing people in the park. The Yosemite Valley in particular has 12 cases, 4 of which I've classified as something of a subcluster around Curry Camp in the middle of the valley. The other 7 are scattered around the valley, some involving people who were last seen leaving their camps, while other disappearances transpired on the trails and peaks in the immediate vicinity. Another such cluster can be found around Naya Lake, about 8 miles northeast of the Yosemite Valley, and this cluster is smaller with only about 5 cases, but it does include the very famous Stacey Harris disappearance, which in my opinion is one of the few genuinely bizarre Missing 411 cases out there, and one of the best documented by far. On top of that, there's another 17 spread throughout the park to the north and south of those clusters, But
Waiting for things to dry.
how many of them are genuinely, unquestionably mysterious? When I started writing for this series, I had a very hard time deciding how to structure it. I knew I wanted to break things down into the various subclusters within the area, but that left those 17 others that didn't really fit into any geographic grouping. So I decided I would fix that problem by starting with the latter kind of story. And after writing and rewriting this script several times, I felt the best way to do that would be to group the cases by one of the few things that they did have in common with one another, which is age. Out of the isolated cases, there are 6 involving people ages 64 and over, 5 involving people aged 42 through 56, and then 6 involving people under the age of 21. Originally, I planned to cover all 17 in this video, but the experiences of the younger cohort differ so widely from those in the older that I felt they would fit better as their own episode. Plus, I've been working nonstop for like 6 weeks.
I barely see what
and
I'm
I
working
need to
on.
rest before diving into the lore behind Skinwalkers for you, our loyal and patient audience. With that, first up are the elderly missing. But before we get to that, we need to talk to you about today's sponsor, Fume. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device that is meant to help you take the bad out of your bad habits so that eventually you can stop using those habits altogether. It's a very simple mission statement. It's really hard to quit something that you've become really accustomed to, but it's a little bit easier to do it if you can still go through the motions without having to worry about things like, smoke and vapor. You see, all this little guy, which as you might have noticed is made out of wood and metal with this little flavoring stick inside, all this little guy is forced air. You just go ahead, it's got a fidgety thing on it too, you just nice, crisp, refreshing stuff in your mouth. And by stuff, I mean oxygen. Put simply, the whole idea behind this guy is that if you're out with your friends, hanging out, and they're all indulging in some bad habits, you can feel like you're part of it without having to do the same. Over 500,000 people have already made the switch to Fume as part of their habit change journey, so if you're ready to try it for yourself, now is the time. And for a limited time, if you order the Journey Pack using our code LORELodge, you'll get a free Fume topper, which is a little silicone guy that goes right over here, which just changes up the mouthfeel, keeps you from putting your lips on some cold hard steel, and that'll level up your experience. So if you're ready to get started, click the link in the description or go to tryfume.com/LoreLodge
I did this
or
backwards.
scan the QR code on screen to get yours today. One main premise of Missing 411, at least on the surface level, is that all of the compiled cases have been thoroughly investigated by the appropriate authorities, and that those authorities were either unable to solve them or unwilling to reveal what they truly believe happened. This is not always true, however, and I like to start by explaining why the ones that don't fit aren't all that strange, so that there's a frame of reference when a case actually does have some bizarre traits. Take the cases of Ruth Jacobus and Elizabeth Bartholomew, for example. Ruth was 73 when she disappeared from her Pioneer, California home on June 7, 1989, and Elizabeth was 80 when she did the same 2 years later outside of the Mid-Pines. The thing is, that's about where the mysteriousness ends. Ruth Jacobus, according to the Sacramento Bee, was last seen walking away from her home at 1:00 p.m. on June 7, 1989. Politis writes that facts surrounding the disappearance were few, and investigators believe that Ruth wandered away from her remote home and got lost in the wilderness. One fact that did exist, and that he left out, however, was plainly stated in that same article. According to the sheriff, this is not the first time that Jacobus has walked away from her home. California is a big place, and she was in a remote part of it, so there's nothing inherently mysterious about her disappearance. Now, the disappearance of Elizabeth Bartholomew received a greater amount of coverage in Missing 411 Western United States.
I only got
but
6
it
of
has
these
still
jars,
issues
so I need to make some more.
suspicious or unsolved. Much as with Ruth's story, Elizabeth was last seen near her home, which was a ranch, at Karsten and Plummer outside of Mid-Pines. Politis notes that the Mariposa County Sheriff's Office immediately responded and claims they said the vegetation around the ranch was so thick that they didn't believe that she could have penetrated it. Thus, he found it odd that law enforcement believed Elizabeth became disoriented, lost, and walked away, even after law enforcement conducted an extensive search and found no evidence of her. Due to the number of man-hours and resources put into the search, he argues that Elizabeth should have been found. Thing is, he left some stuff out. Namely, the fact that Elizabeth reportedly wandered off all the time, and that she was suffering from Alzheimer's, as well as the repercussions of a series of strokes suffered in 1979. In fact, this wasn't even the first time that her husband had to call the sheriff for help over this situation. So, yes, these are technically unsolved, but they're not necessarily mysterious. Kidnapping, while possible, seems unlikely in either Ruth or Elizabeth cases, but the fact of the matter is that they went missing in rural areas rife with mountain lions, and they also weren't even in Yosemite National Park to begin with. Another case where Paulides inexplicably ignores more likely outcomes is that of 86-year-old Doug Pierce, who, to be fair, did go missing inside of the park in April of 2005. Off the bat, I have to point out that this case appears to have received essentially zero coverage in the media, but there is a post on the website Tapatalk, which appears to be something like Web Sleuths, but just for missing people. And that post reads as follows. Pierce was last seen in Modesto, California on April 21st, 2005. He was scheduled to volunteer at Woodland Elementary School and Mariposa Middle School the following day, but never arrived at either place. He has never been heard from again. A few days after Pierce's disappearance, his 1990s model Ford Ranger pickup truck was found stuck in mud and burned on Chalchia Mountain Road above Ponderosa Basin near Summit Camp in Mariposa, California. There was no sign of him at the scene. Authorities stated that it appeared the vehicle had caught fire accidentally, and they theorized that Pierce became lost when he tried to walk out of the mountains after abandoning his car. There is no evidence to support any theory, however, and no possibilities are being ruled out. Oddly enough, this post lists the Modesto Bee, the Fresno Bee, and the website My Mother Lode as sources, but the only active link is to a now-defunct Charlie Project page. Charlie Project doesn't actually link specific stories, just papers and websites, so it's really difficult to determine where any of the information came from, or if
Well,
it's
this was
inaccurate.
easier before I
From the
started it.
Wikipedia
Motherfucker!
411 Western United States and Britain, it would appear that the author simply reworded that post and then printed it. As for why Paulides included it at all, his explanation appears to be that it occurred in relatively close proximity to three
Release me!
those of Teresa Deer
Oh,
and
damn it.
Elizabeth Pearson, who are both in the under 21 age bracket covered in the next episode, and that of James Arthur, who was 67 when he vanished from Beasaur Road near Iron Lakes in July of 2008. According to Paulides, Arthur was a lifetime military man with excellent survival skills, who told his family on the morning of his disappearance that he was going to drive to the area of Star Lake to take photos and would be back before dark. When he wasn't, his family called the sheriff, and in this case we actually do have something of a mystery. It didn't take very long for searchers to find the first evidence of his whereabouts, and Paulides says that they stumbled across his pickup on Beasaur Road at the trailhead to what he refers to as Iron Lakes Reservoir at 12:30 p.m. the following day. The sheriff stated that there was no sign of foul play at the truck, Paulides writes, before adding that the truck was found at about 7,000 feet elevation. Later in the section, he adds that the statement of the sheriff regarding the fact that there was no evidence of foul play at the truck concerns him, before asking if it's possible that the sheriff used his language skills carefully in order to imply that signs of foul play were found elsewhere. Now, this is an important detail because, according to the Fresno Bee, not only was it actually an undersheriff who said that, but what he actually said was, there appear to be no signs of foul play. Paulides completely reframed and reworded what that man said in order to make it appear more mysterious. And while we're at it, I may as well point out that the trailhead to Iron Lakes is not on Beasaur Road at all, and that it's just Iron Lakes, not Iron Lakes Reservoir. As for what happened to James Arthur, the Modesto Bee published an article on August 1st, 2008, in which they explicitly said that he was suffering from health problems that made the search more urgent. His son Jeffrey elaborated in an August 3rd article that his father gets a little weak and dizzy from time to time, which could certainly have an impact on his ability to hike safely. That gives us a hint as to what might have gone wrong, but to Paulides' credit, this is one of the more questionable disappearances out there. The only clue to his whereabouts was a sighting reported by two hikers who believed they saw him on the trail to Iron Lakes, but all they could say is that he was there. One of these witnesses said they had a conversation with him, and then the other said that they saw him sitting down. On the one hand, it's not like the stories of Dennis Martin or Pauline Melton, where someone vanishes just moments after they were last seen by friends and family, but on the other, it is somewhat odd that James was never found. Not even his camera or walking stick had turned up in nearly 2 decades since he disappeared. One possibility is that he went off trail to try and photograph something, and either had a medical emergency or became injured, but he'd have to have gone pretty far off trail to get outside of the 16 square mile search area, which would be odd considering that he was in fact a retired Air National Guard lieutenant colonel, and should have known a thing or two about survival. According to another lieutenant colonel from Fresno who knew James fairly well, the man was also an avid camper and hiker, so he wasn't a novice to outdoorsmanship. The one thing that comes to mind as a potential mundane reason for his disappearance, outside of poor decision-making, would be a mountain lion attack, but even the authorities don't seem to have considered that a possibility. Or if they did, it wasn't mentioned in the papers. The story of Nita Mayo falls along similar lines in that her car was found in a parking area and that she was believed to have been taking pictures at the time she disappeared in August of 2005. And there's no clear explanation for her disappearance. Like James Arthur, she was alone in the park, but had told people where she was going and was reported missing when she didn't turn up where she was expected to be. When searchers discovered her 1997 Mercury Sable at Donald Vista Overlook off of Highway 108, Modesto PD reported that her purse, ID, credit cards, and cell phone were all inside. But, like James Arthur, her camera was not. This led authorities to believe that she had left her car to take pictures, and one immediate fear was that she had gone too close to the edge of the overlook and slipped. However, when dog teams, climbers, and helicopters searched the area over the following weeks, not one trace of her turned up, not even a piece of the camera. That's actually very similar to the disappearance of a guy named Michael Malinowski, who we covered in one of our Pennsylvania Missing 411 cluster videos, but there's also reason to believe that there might have been foul play there.
This Charmin Ultra Soft Smooth Tear has wavy edges. It's no ordinary square. Charmin Ultra Soft Smooth Tear has wavy perforations that tear so much better, with more cushiony softness. Enjoy the go with Charmin.
It'll take a few days for all the bubbles to
Cleaning your dog's teeth can be a
pop
chore.
out, but yeah.
But not with Greenie's dental treats. Greenie's, well-being made wonderful.
Intuit QuickBooks is proud to team up with the NHL and help Canadian players in business perform at the top of their game. Because to win, you need a solid game plan. You need the right gear, the right tools, so you can face off against any challenge. Break through barriers, grab those opportunities, and manage your team like a champ. Because to stay ahead of the competition, you gotta keep your eyes on the puck. I'm looking at you, hardworking, determined entrepreneur, changing the face of the game by doing business differently. We know it ain't child's play, but we believe in you.
Oh my god, stop talking. There we go.
In this case, I do have to agree with Politis that it seems as though something very unusual and very dark happened to this woman, though I don't necessarily agree with the argument he makes, which is that an abduction by vehicle would have been a risky maneuver and therefore an unlikely answer to how she disappeared. I do think an abduction is unlikely, but mainly because she would almost have to be a victim of opportunity, and that profile doesn't typically include 64-year-old women. Unless we're considering a serial killer, but there don't seem to be any similar cases in the area, and no further evidence to support that line of thinking. That said, I do wonder if she might have been hit by a car. If so, a panic driver might have taken
regular
her body
curly
from the scene and
Lily,
disposed of it elsewhere
and the
to
prick
avoid
curly
manslaughter
Lily.
charges.
There we go.
While it would technically be a mystery of what precisely
Pearl in it.
happened
I don't know how real Pearl
David
would
Politis is talking about
act.
a different kind of mystery. Last among the elderly cohort of the isolation cluster, so to speak, is Walter Reinhardt, who went missing while hiking near White Wolf Campground in 2002 at the age of 66. According to Politis, Reinhardt is not listed as missing on any county, state, or national database, and there are no articles indicating he has ever been found. Reinhardt actually is listed on the National Park Service's cold case page, but it's possible that at the time David was writing his book he wasn't, so Politis gets a pass here. According to the Park Service, he was last seen on September 19, 2002, and the Los Angeles Times wrote that a park employee who was closing down a lodge in the White Wolf area is believed to be the last person to have seen him. The employee told Reinhardt's son, Kevin, that he remembered a fellow with a German Alpine hat asking directions that morning to a lake a few miles up the trailhead. To be honest, I was conflicted about putting Reinhardt down as potentially mysterious in my own categorization, mainly due to his age and how little was known about his plans for that day. But what gave me pause was his level of physical fitness and his experience as a Marine veteran of 24 years. According to the LA Times, the 66-year-old worked out in the gym 3 hours a day, was active in the hiking club at the retirement community where he lived, and was a member of Marine
Look at all those
Force
bubbles.
Recon,
They'll settle
which
eventually.
was in Vietnam under his belt. That is just not the
See,
kind of guy you
this is
would
starting to
expect to
settle
have
down
a heart
now.
attack on a recreational
Except for
trail
that guy.
or go
That guy's
down
still
to a
aggravating me.
minor sprain. He also wasn't anywhere along the nearest 150 miles of trail surrounding his last known position, which would mean that he must have deliberately gone off trail in extremely rugged territory, as Park Ranger Jen Schweitzer put it. The search for Reinhardt lasted over 2 weeks and involved park staff, sheriff's deputies, and even a contingent of 28 Marines from the Mountain Warfare Training Center in Bridgeport. But after nothing could be found in that time, the Park Service chose to suspend the search. This case remains open, but is considered a missing persons case with no suspicion of foul play so far as the Park Service is concerned. As far as Paulides is concerned, however, there is another reason to look at this case with suspicion, and it's largely because of its proximity to another disappearance which occurred 3 years later. Michael Feisery was 51 years old when he disappeared in June of 2005. Last seen on the 15th, he was expected to be camping in the backcountry north of Hetch Hetchy Reservoir in the northern sector of Yosemite National Park. According to Paulides, his permit expired on the 19th, and when he still wasn't back on the 21st, his family contacted the Park Service to report him missing. The section on Michael's disappearance isn't particularly long, just 2 paragraphs, but it tells us that his backpack was found off the trail near Tiltil Mountain, which is not in a location where he had planned to be, and that beyond this, searchers could find no evidence of his whereabouts. His camera, water bottle, and a topographic map of the area were missing, and in large part, this is mysterious because of its very close proximity to the disappearance of Walter Reinhardt. To be fair, nothing David said here is egregiously incorrect. According to the Sacramento Bee, Michael was last seen on the trail to Tiltil Mountain on the 15th, and his backpack was found on June 22nd. The problem is more with the framing of the case, because when you zoom out and look at it with some objectivity, there's nothing particularly strange. First of all, David uses a very subjective definition of close proximity, in that Michael's backpack was recovered over 10 miles away from Reinhardt's last known position.
No, I
But
consider
that doesn't tell the whole story. The actual on-trail distance between those 2 locations is nearly 30 miles, with a large lake and a river in between them. In practicality, those 2 men were about 2 days of hiking away from one another, and separated by 3 years. Now, if you're saying Bigfoot did it, and I firmly believe that David is, these are close together. If you're just looking at the evidence, though, they're simply not.
Release your
The only
bubbles
strange
and
thing about the
sink,
case
damn
is
you!
that weren't able to track Michael from his backpack, which was described as on the forest floor and near Tiltil Mountain. But for all anyone knew, that backpack could have been there since the 15th, and dogs didn't get to it for a full week. Scent trails degrade with time, and dogs still aren't always reliable even under perfect conditions. As with most of the cases in the first segment of this video, Michael's disappearance can be explained by poor decision-making, and the only somewhat odd part is that nobody ever found his remains. And even that's really not as weird as you might think, given the scale of the area and the potential for scavenging by wild animals. Now, I do want to pause for a second and explain why it is that I'm just kind of breezing through these ones, even if several of them do come across as somewhat odd. And that's because hiking through a few places where people we've covered have gone missing has given me a lot of perspective. Paul LeMay, for example, seemed like such a bizarre situation until we went to Mount Marathon and saw how lush and dense the forest and undergrowth there can be in the summer. One thing that comes up again and again in articles is the fact that searchers consistently
What do
say
you think?
the brush is incredibly dense.
Like
and that if
these?
somebody were to get on the trail, it would be possible to miss them even from just a few feet away. In cases like these, I just keep thinking about how easy it
That
would have been
mist
to disappear in Alaska
coming up from the
if I'd taken
bottom.
a wrong step
That's
and could
just
not
like the
recover.
micro bubbles coming
The
out
only
of the
shot at
sand.
finding someone in a place like that would be with dogs, and as I said, they're not perfect. Not every case in the book involves people who just disappeared and were never found, however, and the stories of Fred Clausen and Christopher Andrews are 2 such examples. Fred was 46 when he disappeared in 2003, and Christopher 42
All
when
right.
he vanished in 2008. Their bodies turned up approximately 22 miles from one another, and Paulides would have us believe that
Finish
both
those
were
up.
found in unexplainable locations. According to Western United States, Fred was last seen alive when he left Crown Lake on August 1st of 2003, having arrived via Mule and Burrow Pass, and with plans to make his way to Twin Lakes via Matterhorn Pass and the Horse Creek
I
Trail.
don't have
I do really quickly want
lids
to
for
point out
these
that
guys.
Mule
That's
and
the
Burrow
problem.
Pass are not a thing. It's Mule Pass and Burrow Pass. Don't know why he wrote it that way. Not surprised. In any case, Politis writes that Fred was an expert with audio and video equipment, and that when he disappeared, he had microphones and video equipment with the intent of filming a thunderstorm that he had predicted to hit the area. According to the Merced Sun Star, Fred's wife Martha reported him missing when he didn't turn.
Shh, I don't care. That's annoying me. At least your bubble. Can't even see him anymore. Where is he? Oh, is that the bubble? There. Oh, shit. Sink. There we go. These will take a day or two to settle. I think that's fine. Little trinket. Definitely gonna have to mix that glue a bit more. You can see it kind of thicker at the bottom, obviously. You can see the glass balls running. It's kind of cool. All right. Should I put glitter in there? I don't know if it would sink or swim. I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do. I don't want to do anything. I'm tired. I can go get some more jars. How many do I need? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can get 2 more packages of jars. And that'll finish up all the jellyfish. Finally. After sitting literally years. If I get 3, though, I could break these. I don't think I can get these guys out. Just a little bit too big. Yeah, I'm not going to get these out without breaking them. It might have to be a sacrifice. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 6, 6, and 3. Alright, I'm going to need 3 packages of jars, and that'll finish up the jellyfish. So I'm going to grab those, and I'll be back. I know, boring live streams, but we're getting there. Starting to get back into the swing of things. Back in a bit.